This podcast is brought to you by the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of the Herzog Foundation. Hold on. You mean to tell me you haven't saved March 24th for the Maryland Association of Christian Schools Administrators Retreat at Restoration Farm in Harford County, Maryland? For only $30, you get 2 great meals, Q&A with veteran leaders, some hilarious hosts, and just time spent in fellowship with those who know what you're going through. And if you're a Max member, it's free. Come on, email us at info@christianprinciplespodcast.com and register now. Welcome to the Christian Principles Podcast. I'm Matt George.
And I'm Mark Zockel. Today we are joined by a new friend, someone that I was able to meet recently, and then hopefully we're going to have him on again, talk to us about something today, talking about something again in the future, but that's Mr. Bill Stevens. Mr. Bill Stevens is the president, executive director, major boss of? Director of the MidAtlantic Christian School Association. Bill, thanks for coming on with us today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We have mission critical, like we were talking about with the Herzog Foundation previously. We have that mission critical alignment with the MidAtlantic Christian School Association. We want to see Christian schools grow. We want to see Christian education get stronger. Right, Matt?
Nope. No,
Nope.
I mean, yes. The correct answer is yes. That's why we're here.
Great.
Make it multiple choice. He may be able to pick up on it.
Maybe, but you'd be surprised. Even then, sometimes not the brightest. So, before we get into content, why don't we hear from our brand partner?
You've got lesson plans, parent-teacher conferences, and now hiring? Don't let recruiting become your next headache. Let Zockel HR Consulting help with the heavy lifting. Visit www.zhrconsulting.com today. The Christian Principles Podcast is excited to share that we've joined the Herzog Foundation Podcast Network, a hub dedicated to advancing K-12 education and the Christian values we all share. The Herzog Foundation exists to catalyze and accelerate the development of quality Christ-centered K-12 education nationwide, helping families and culture flourish. One of their most impactful resources for Christian school leaders like us is the Herzog Foundation Institute. This program offers fully funded training events and retreats, enabling us to sharpen our skills without adding cost to our schools. Led by national experts, these events cover essential topics like marketing, donor development, and culture building, all tailored to the unique needs of Christian schools. Held monthly in Kansas City and other locations across the country, these events equip schools and their leaders with the tools and strategies they need to thrive. Don't miss the opportunity to explore all the Herzog Foundation has to offer. Together, we can strengthen Christ-centered education. Learn more at herzogfoundation.com. That's herzogfoundation.com. All right, we're back and we're ready to jump in today, talking with Bill Stevens. And a lot of this came from a letter that he sent out. Mark, you're going to give us a little bit of a synopsis of that, and we'll jump in with more questions.
So Bill, I was excited when I passed West Fallowfield Christian School in Pennsylvania on my way back from my brother-in-law's, and I saw they were part of the Mid-Atlantic Christian Association. I wanted to know more. Christian School Association, I wanted to know more, so I reached out to the number on the website. I got you. We had a conversation. We had a second conversation. We emailed back and forth. And one of the things that when I got added to your subscription list, you sent out was a letter to your constituents concerning in-person professional development. And that was very interesting to me because I just came off of 2 fall in-service professional development opportunities, one in Pennsylvania, one in Virginia at KCEA, and the other one at ODAX. But I also know that there's plenty of times when especially the moms that are part of my faculty and staff, or the faculty and staff I've had, and even my peers now, if they could get away with doing something virtually, they'd be really excited about it. So I'm excited to talk to you about this letter you sent out to the constituents.
That letter is a a visionary casting for something that we used to do back in the day, pre-COVID, for one reason. When I was the head at Wilmington Christian School in Delaware, a friend of mine who was up in Connecticut, head of a school up there, we got together and said, wouldn't it be great if we had what eventually became known as the Northeast Roundtable? And by invitation, we invited 40 people to come and gather in the Poconos at Spruce Lake Bible Conference. And we spent 2 evenings and 2.5 days together, and no keynote speaker, no seminars, but the invitees, the ones that accepted and came, were each to submit a topic that they would like to talk about. And then in our 6 sessions together, we took one of those topics, and let's just say for the sake of today that Matt submitted the topic of admissions. And how do you handle admissions? What are some good ways what are some innovative things we could do? And then we would spend the hour or so just talking about that. And then we'd move to the next topic. And then we'd have time for just breaking out, and you could meet with me alone. 3 or 4 could get together. We're praying and that kind of thing. Well, it was so successful that we did it for 8 years. And then COVID hit, and we couldn't get the camp. We couldn't get any camp, for that matter. Right. And so we had to stop doing it. And since that, and I don't believe that COVID's the only reason, but that was obviously the thing that happened that kind of separated us all. And then we just have gone to these virtual training sessions, and I'm old school enough, and my personality is such that I think we need to be together. I think the kingdom work is about getting together as people face to face and coming to grips with what's going on, and sharing and being vulnerable and being open and praying together and doing all of what we just said. And so I thought, now down here as the director of MAXA, I'd try it again. I know you asked me, how was the success of the roundtable? Well, I invited 42 people, heads of schools, because it's by invitation and it's for just heads of schools. Mm-hmm. Out of the 42, 4 responded that they would be interested in being a part of it. 10 wrote and said they wouldn't be interested, and the rest never responded at all. And so it wasn't any success. I was disappointed. Wasn't the time, and I could sit around with you 2 guys and try to figure out what's the problem, what's the situation. I've seen a bunch of them personally since then, and it was like, I'm really busy, things are going on, and I'm finding that we're so busy that we're missing some really important things to do that may interfere with our busyness. And are we willing to do that?
So, Bill, Matt and I were invited to, as co-hosts of the podcast, come to the Maryland Association of Christian Schools administrative retreat, which it's not an overnight roundtable, but it is a retreat of administrators or the administrative team of the buildings for the Maryland Association of Christian Schools member schools, with some other guests around. And so we've been promoting that a lot on the podcast, and even the commercial for this episode will have a commercial for that same. And as I've been, to your point, as I was talking with a peer about coming, and this peer is young in their professional development. It's young in their professional life as an administrator. And one of the things that was said to me in the conversation about whether or not this peer was going to be able to come was, I just, getting away is relatively impossible. And one of the things I shared with him, and I'm sure you might have been the wise person that told me this at one point in the past, or I heard it from you, or the person who I heard it from you. But the wise person would say back to me, you know what, if the ministry truly is going to fall apart because you're not there for one day, you should probably step away for a lot longer than one day, because at that point, whose ministry really is it? And that, that resonated with me, and I was able to pass that on to that peer. Hopefully not in an offensive way, but just it got me thinking back in the day, like, yeah, if I'm not doing my job as an administrator to empower those around me, so that when, my famous phrase, when I get turned to jelly on 50, that they can operate without me, without what I bring to the table anyway, well then shame on me. So. And maybe that's not all of it. Maybe they truly have other, I'm sure they do have a lot of other things going on in the time and whatnot. But still, it's something to consider. So
I think you could come up with half a dozen of reasons, all that seem important. But I will tell you that what you said about being busy, you have principals that have a small staff, so they can't get away because they're doing some teaching or whatever it is, all stuff that, can be important on your list. But I will say that for me, and I've been around a long time, that it's part of a bigger concern that I have, in that boards of schools do not know what's going on with their head or with the governance of their school. And that the board and the head of school relationship is the most sacred of all of them. And so is your board giving opportunity for your head to get away and refresh themselves? Because we're finding that the shelf life of heads of schools is becoming a lot less than it used to be. I mean, I've administrated 2 Christian schools each for 17 years. And I don't hear people that are in the business that long anymore. Not the younger crowd.
Sure.
So I think COVID, I'm too busy, I can't get away. I think the board could say, you're going away because you need to get refreshed. And so we're going to make that opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And Max is here to help provide those opportunities. So when we talk about collaboration, I'm the guy that helps you collaborate, if I can put it that way. And go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that, the administration, the building leaders that we're talking to right now are so consumed with making sure that their staff, their faculty are being upheld and being encouraged and being strengthened. And I know even I've had the thought that if I step away, how am I going to hurt that relationship? Oh, there he goes again. He's leaving. He's leaving us here in a lurch, whatever. But at the same time, those over us, whether it be the board or in our situation, the senior pastor of the church, they're just assuming, okay, the administrator, he's in charge of everything with the school. He'll make sure that he's got his schedule of when things need to be done. And it's a little awkward for an administrator to say, well, guys, I need time too. Because it maybe sounds like you're being lazy or trying to get out of it, but educating your board. And we had a podcast about that board relationship, and a big thing that stood out to Mark and I, we talked about it especially after, is educating the board. Don't assume they understand their responsibility, and that it is going to involve, like, guys, I need to put it out to you, or guys, ladies, whoever's on the board, that one thing I'm going to ask of you is be mindful of me, because I'm not always going to be mindful of me. Accountability, but also look for times when I'm just drained and I need to be encouraged and I need to be uplifted, or maybe I could do something better, and you're finding time that I could go and get into a program of, a class or two, or a workshop or a round table, and provide those opportunities. But I need you as a board or as a school president to be mindful of that and looking for those opportunities. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So, for me, it's a 2-pronged thing. The head getting away and getting that refreshment, retraining. Oh, wow, I never thought of that before. Yeah, that's great. And sharing ideas, sharing burdens. And I want to tell you about one of the aspects, but I'll get to that in a minute. But the other side is the board training. And that's something else that Maxa does. I can come to your school and meet with your board and show them, talk to them, hear from them about what is their idea of the responsibilities of this board to the head of the school, because that's the sacred relationship of your school. It's not about the board running the school and evaluating teachers and what are you serving for lunch today. It's ministering to the head of the school and making sure his welfare is strong and healthy. So we've got those two ministries, but how do you break that cycle of what you were talking about, Matt, of how do you break that cycle and break away and say, I'm going to do this, or your board is going to say, you're doing this?
That's the question.
Yep.
We could bottle it up.
Invite me down, invite a couple of schools to join and have their boards get together, and I'll come and we'll spend time together. And it's something that, yeah, you can do that on a television screen and all of that, but it's not the same as sitting in front of a bunch of board members. And I'm that honest, yet I love you guys. And so it's like that, I can hit you in the face with it, and I do it in a loving way. And I think there's an opportunity God has given us for this, because we're all admitting to the same problem, but then it's like wringing our hands as to what to do about it.
Right. We just got to take action.
Even getting to know you guys is providential to me. Something's got to come of this.
Getting back to the letter that you sent out, one of the things that we wanted to ask you about, if you recall it, is we're looking for times to be encouraging to our administrative peers out there, and I love stories. I often push people to hear their stories from times past when they were either, they learned something a certain way or they were encouraged a certain way. What do you have any specific memories of that Northeast Roundtable experience, that time, those over the years that you were able to make that happen?
Yes.
That you would say, hey, these certain times were most effectual, and they gave evidence to the mission for why this existed. Go for it. What were some?
I know a guy that used to head a school. Now he's retired, and he said, Bill, those roundtables were the best thing I did all year. And I went to a number of conferences, but there's only so much you can go to these. They want you to come down to Orlando or out to San Diego, right, and you end up just going from one seminar to another, and it's all a bunch of movie stars that are putting on seminars for you, and you're like getting hit with a fire hose, and then you go home and you say, what do I do with all that? So here's something that we did. When you talk about detail, we developed what was called 3-chair prayer. And because it was a round table, we had the tables all, well, it was actually a square. So, but we all sat around the table and did our thing all for the 3 days that we were together. And you're probably saying, 3 days? I can't even get away for one. But time after time, they said how great that was to do that and just stay away from the phone, stay away from all of that. But we developed this 3-chair prayer thing. And we had 3 chairs that we put in the middle of the square, and people knew what it was for, and I would just say, okay, who wants to be first? And so let's pick on you two guys. So Mark gets up out of his chair, he goes and sits in the middle chair, and he says, I'm really struggling right now, people. I've come to this point in my life, and I'm trying to do this and that, and just goes into it. 2 other people go and sit in the other 2 chairs, and they pray for that person.
Wow.
And that doesn't seem like a big deal.
No, that seems like a big deal. That seems like a big deal. When you
think of the kingdom of God and what God's called us to and Christ exemplified for us, it's the biggest deal we can have. And so
I think I'm going to change what the schedule is for that for our co-host event in March right now. Yeah. We might change some things up.
And so and there's a vulnerability that I think we fear because we're running a school. And so I don't want my leadership to look like I don't know what I'm doing. But isn't it a case when we came to the Lord that we said, I don't know what I'm doing, Jesus, come into my life and change it. So it's an example that we see we can do for each other, and then it helps us to be vulnerable with our faculties when we go back, even our kids. But there are teachers that are hurting, and you can say, come in and tell me about it. Let's spend some time together. Let me pray for you. And so then after those two people finish praying, they hug each other, go back to their seats. Next, and we would spend an hour and a half at least with people coming. And I mean, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm actually thinking of resigning, those kinds of things. Emotions being, and you just lay it out there, and you have brothers and sisters that are there and to strengthen you. And so, I mean, that's probably the biggest story I have, but stories of you and I, hey, Bill, can I talk to you privately after this session? And we go out for a walk in the woods, and we just sit there on a rock somewhere and talk. And I really need help with this. I got a teacher that I'm not really performing like I need them to. And what do I do? What's your experience with dismissing someone? It's not fun. So we walk through those technicalities that, oh yeah, you can have someone that comes to a big seminar and tells you how to do that. But it's different when you're one-on-one and you're just letting it hang out and getting help and encouragement.
Yeah, I think that point of vulnerability, I mean, in any relationship, if you're just constantly trying to keep up an image or keep up a front, you're not going to get what you actually need. And
Yep.
Here we are as building leaders, and we're putting it out there for our faculty. We're telling them to be vulnerable to us, and we're willing to, sit down and talk.
Mm-hmm.
But for us to turn it around on them and be like, well, I'm really struggling. So, that's not where you do it.
Yeah.
So to get away with others in the same position as you are, they have the same skin in the game, and to be able to say, I know you will understand this struggle. Like, I think that is the key element there is, I'm not proud enough to say I'm the only one who struggles with this. So, I see that I love that 3-chair prayer, because even though I can definitely see, because I've experienced similar things where you put out there, it's a great idea, and then you say, okay, whoever wants to go up.
Yeah, who's the first one?
Crickets.
You got to prime that pump a little bit.
One.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know, even in my mind, even though I'd be one of those people too that'd be really slow to pull that trigger, but I know I'd be staring at that chair and I'd be thinking, man, there is just, let me pull out this laundry list that I could really have everybody. And that's where I think the importance of that 3 days too, because first day, it may not get a lot of action there, but I guarantee by the time we've got like 2 hours left before we're done. Like, hey, can we do the chair thing again? Can we pull those out? Let's do it a couple more times before we leave. I can see how that's going to build.
Point. It's what happened up to that point, and sometimes the day is just not enough. You're there, you're gone. You got to get back before school closes. You got to get back for dismissal. So you got to spend the time. And the other thing I wanted to stress to you in talking about this is that the two things at your end, as the head of the school, is that you're there to shepherd your flock and you're there to visionize for the future of the school. But if you're running around, doing stuff all the time, or you're maybe even teaching a class or whatever,
or
it's
5 or 6
away, because if you're visionizing, it's like you're not doing anything. If you're shepherding people, going around and seeing how you're doing, how's everybody going, that's just who you are. That's the role that he's given you, and yet we never get to that because we're at this. Remember this book? No, you guys are too young. You remember this book, Tyranny of the Urgent? This
I've
book is
heard of
so
it.
small. It's 10 pages long. It was published in 1967, and the tyranny of the urgent was a theme back then that that was big, and that is you guys are stuck in the tyranny of the urgent, and you never get to be who God called you to be in the school. And I think that's going to be desperately needed in the future for our Christian school movement, particularly in the Mid-Atlantic region, the Northeast region.
Yeah. Now, Bill, you've talked about this, and I want to just kind of highlight this again because it's a theme that's come up even in our podcast quite a bit. But when it comes to the community that you're building at a retreat like that, a round table at that, you let everybody know. You said we seem to be cloistering ourselves away, and I think you even said that when we were introducing this. And for whatever reason, whether it is the tyranny of the urgent or whatever, but we've been cloistering. It seems a lot more even since COVID times. But the way I've always thought of it, and I even communicated with my teachers, is you're sailing off onto your own island, and you're getting comfortable on your island, but I know as you were thinking through that of us, of leaders being more cloistered, I want to give you an opportunity just to elaborate a little bit more on that and what you think, what has potentially been a cause for us as Christian school leaders to just get comfortable with staying on our own island.
Yep. Okay. Well, cloistering, I'm a history teacher by training, and my favorite period of history is the Middle Ages, and so cloistering is a word that comes natural to me with the cathedrals and monasteries and stuff, and it's where you're squirreled away, and you're just inside the four walls, and maybe you're translating the Bible, which is great, but that you're all alone, you're all alone with the other people that are all alone. And it's interesting because before you came on, Mark and I were sharing about the term siloing. And in Lancaster County, that's more of a vivid illustration than cloistering because we don't have monasteries around here. But the siloing.
But you got lots of cows out there.
Yeah,
lots of cows.
But there's you where we even live is you don't have to drive too far, and you can look out over a vista of 20 or 30 silos. And you think of each one of those silos being a Christian school, and it's like we never even see each other. We never get together, and we're right down the road from each other. And so we're in, and we've gone to this. I'm sorry to say it this way. Again, I'm old school, but we're going to the TV. We're going to a video that somebody in California is doing for us. And your faculty is sitting there after school, after they've spent a whole day at school, and they're either listening to this person talk and grading papers. Some of them are probably even dozing off, or at least saying, I got to get out of here.
And no, they would never do that.
Why are we doing this now? But the point being is that we're not like sitting next to another Christian school teacher at a conference and saying, did you get that? Or, hi, I'm Bill Stevens. I'm from Wilmington Christian. And, oh, yeah, no. And getting to know the other people that are in this movement with us and hearing somebody that's standing there sharing with us life experience and what they've known. And so this siloing is we're all doing our own professional development and not seeing, and we lose maybe the total picture. We're almost getting, and I hate to say it this way because I'm an educator, but we're almost getting so technical with pedagogy and teaching style that we're not being refreshed spiritually, and we're not being refreshed in this biblical worldview that we say we're doing. But most of our teachers are young. They may not even be sure what it is that they are doing in terms of biblical worldview. And so I think it's time. It's that generational time because I came in an earlier time, back in the 80s, when, yeah, we learned all about biblical worldview. We learned how to integrate. And I think I've been in a generation now, and I see the next wave of teachers, the next wave of administrators needing that refreshing in why we do what we do. And Herzog is just great at doing that too. And that's why I wanted
Hey,
to go.
absolutely. We are so excited that they see this as common. They see this as a common theme with you, with us. And yeah, what Herzog is doing is we enjoy it. We enjoy the support that they've already provided us, including this new Riverside recording studio that we're excited to try out. And hopefully, even as we're doing it, our audio quality and our video quality are such that we're going to make an even better product out of for you, our constituency, for you, our listener, to only grow what it is that we're doing here on the podcast. But Bill, I've gotten more excited about that March 24th Max admin meeting. It's just a day, but I've gotten even more excited for that meeting as we've been talking. I know Matt, I saw him shaking his head with the 3-chair prayer. I'm probably going to have to go in and literally rip out something that we were planning on doing and put that in there at some point, or at least have a real consideration for how we could do that together. Because yes, if we're not praying for one another in a situation like that, and even recently on this podcast, and we'll do this, after we say goodbye to you and whatnot, we record later on and bring up the Christian Administrator Spotlight for this episode, we're going to pray for them live. And that is something that, crazy enough, even today in the Bible class I was teaching with the 8th graders, we are on Unit 14, which is the importance of prayer, and the importance of prayer in the major events of the Bible, including, and I always go to Elijah on Mount Carmel, right, calling down fire from heaven, and his simple prayer versus all the prayers that went to Baal that day. What an amazing thing! This conversation has been beautiful, even if just for 3-chair prayer. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Bill, it's just been a pleasure talking to you and meeting you today on the podcast. And we want to just give you a second and share a little bit more about MidAtlantic and what they contribute.
Yeah, it's been around. It is the oldest Christian school organization. We've been around for a long time, 80 years. We're small, but we can hit the ground and we make house calls, and we're a grassroots organization. And so if I can be a help to any of your member schools, boards, as we talked about earlier, hoping to develop some of these services, even bringing more of Herzog to you as they become partners with us. So there's some exciting days ahead, and I'm going to do it as long as the Lord gives me strength and health and the opportunity. So.
Well, Bill, let me put you on the spot here. What is the farthest north school, the school farthest north in the U.S. that is part of MAXA?
The southern part of New York.
And the most southern?
Southern part would be, there's a school in Baltimore. And, oh, no, I'm sorry, take that back. There's a school in Virginia, which surprises me because that's technically not in the Mid-Atlantic region, but they want to be a member because they have nothing to hold on to. So they come up to the conference from Virginia.
Gotcha. And you've said before in the conversations that it's a non-denominational association, but there's a great Mennonite school presence amongst you.
There is in Lancaster County in particular, but over in New Jersey and Delaware and Pennsylvania, we have a lot of just non-denominational schools. Yes. But the Mennonites are strong in Lancaster County, and that's why they're small. They just are looking for something to help.
All right. Well, Bill, thank you so much.
Guys, thank you a lot for having me, and God bless you and your ministry and what you do with what we talked about. Yep.
Awesome.
Thanks, Bill.
Take care.
All right. And for today's Christian Administrator Spotlight here on the Christian Principles Podcast, we're going to be spotlighting Mr. Dan Bonner. Matt, tell us about Dan Bonner.
Yeah, Dan Bonner. They're a community in Saginaw. We had just highlighted not too long ago Pastor Doug Jackson. And Dan Bonner is the principal there at the school who assists Pastor Jackson while he fulfills the administrative role. Dan is the principal. He's been the youth pastor as well for many years. I got to know Dan back in college days. One of the first things I ever did outside of just going to class in college, I was invited to go down to a youth rally. There we go. And Dan and a couple other guys and I went down to Illinois and helped set up the rally before all the teens came. And it was really cool. Dan just he's one of those guys, he sees you, he invests in you. And I'm sure, I know kids that have gone through his youth program know how much he cares about their spiritual walk with God. He's got a lot of energy, exciting person to be around. And just, again, another one of those servants that is fulfilling a responsibility not just in a church, but also understands the importance of the school and is a part of that there. So thankful for Dan and his contributions to Christian education there in Saginaw, Michigan.
Saginaw Mission. I'm going to pray for Dan right now. Father in heaven, we thank you for Dan and what he is doing there in Saginaw. We thank you for what he's doing in his church and what he's doing in his school, for his time spent, even with Matt there at the undergraduate level, for his time spent influencing Matt and those around him, and those who's influencing now, and those, Lord, we pray he'll be influencing in his future. Give him the grace that only comes from you, the strength that only comes from you, to be purposeful and to be pursuing the work as we have talked about, and even as we spoke about earlier on this podcast. Give him time to know himself and to know what he needs to be successful in his role through you. Amen.
All right, that's going to wrap up this episode. I just want to really quickly say, Mark, as we finish this up, because I know we typically end our episodes by encouraging people to continue listening and following this episode, but yep. I want to go a little bit further.
Okay.
I want to get outside of our podcast, because listening to Bill, I want our listeners to go talk with another administrator. Like,
talk with them.
Even if it's just get in your car and go down to the closest Christian school next to you. Find somebody to connect.
Knock on that door.
You can definitely, you're welcome to come to the Max Administrators Retreat. We'll make it easy for you. You can just do it and check that off. Say, okay, I did the thing Matt asked me to do. But again, my heart is there for Bill, who reached out to those 42 people and only 4 people responded. We can do better than that, folks. Let's do it.
Absolutely.
Let's get out there. Let's grow together.
Thanks for growing with us today.
Could we ask you a favor? Please help us grow our channel by clicking on the plus follow button at the top of the screen on Apple Podcasts, or the follow button on the main podcast page on Spotify. Taking this step helps boost our ratings, but more importantly, gets us in more Christian school admins' ears. Also, it'll keep our latest content in your feed. This little action could help us take this podcast a long way.